It's Eric, and it's Friday. It is 1 a.m. on Friday morning, and I've got a lot of questions from you all. So I'm going to dive right into Viewers' Choice Week. So, Gary and Chris asked me, what do you do when you're trying to get a handle on your thirst, or if you're obsessing too hard? And I'm going to tell you guys that I am absolutely not the person to ask about that because I have fixation kind of tendencies and I just need to disengage. I need to put that person out of my mind. I need to not think about them. I need to not be around them. I need to just step aside and do something else because sometimes I will write novels or poetry or something if it's too far gone and I don't need to be there. I do not need to be that person. So ask someone else about how they handle thirst and obsession because that is not something I have a good handle on. Chester asks me about voice acting because I just started doing this voiceover stuff. I've been trying to get my sound system set up, and he asks me, how do you come up with the voices for the characters in a book? And that is a really fantastic question. Part of it has to do with the background of the character, who they are, if they have any kind of pattern to the way that they speak in the novel, if the author has written them with a kind of a dialect or a twang. Sometimes that's really obvious in the way that it's written, and sometimes it's less so. It may come out in the way that the narrative is structured. And I try to consider the timbre of the person's voice as well. If I'm doing a female voice, I may slightly go up into a higher register, but or a deeper male voice, if that's something that I feel is appropriate. But it's about reading between the lines. It's about breaking down the way that the author describes the person and the way that they speak in a way that I can attempt to emulate. I'm not that great at it. I'll be totally honest. It's still a work in progress, but it is something that I absolutely am trying to do. Brandon and Jonathan asked me about do's and don'ts of bar flirting. So, this is a subtle art. The kinds of things that you want to do when you are just trying to break out and strike up a conversation with somebody in a bar is to come on gently. Start by complimenting someone, introducing yourself, listen to what it is that they have to say, find out what their interests are, ask them some open-ended questions, and give them some eye movements and some gentle hand movements and things like that to indicate that you're interested. Don'ts would be don't just go straight for touching and groping. That is sexual assault. That has been part of gay bar culture for a very long time, and people are kind of moving past that now. So let's leave the touching to consensual touch. Don't be negative about yourself or about your person that you're chatting up. Try to keep things on a positive bent. No one wants to have a downer when they're trying to flirt with somebody. And don't try to cut in if somebody's having a conversation. Don't just butt yourself in there. Find a time when there is an opening to make that introduction. A lot of times people go to places with their friends or with colleagues or something, and you want to be able to find an opportune moment to actually break in and have that conversation with them. So I hope that helps. Nick and Matt asked me, do straight people ever just kind of seem weird to you, or straight culture seem weird to you? And have you ever had a disconnect between gay and straight people when you're around them? And absolutely yes. This is a very weird thing. Straight culture has a whole thing about modesty that gay culture really tries to throw out the window. And we have a much more open, sex positive culture. And so, like, sometimes I may find myself saying something that may be completely alien to a straight person because their lives and their mindsets just aren't patterned that way. But I will also share one fantastic story. So I spent a week at a Radical Fairy gathering in Tennessee, and I bought this T-shirt that said "Sodomy, not bombs" with a great big dildo on it. And I wore that, as we were leaving the festival. And, I was just, like driving through Tennessee, no big deal, with a t-shirt with a great big fucking dildo on it. And then I, stopped to go get gas and to get snacks. And I thought to myself, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't have on this shirt with a dildo on it in the middle of Tennessee because people might think that's uncouth or unusual. So yeah. So sometimes gay culture can be a little too far, I think, but I think the straight culture is like the opposite end. Uh, so especially like kind of toxic straight culture that's like far too propriety minded. Yeah. All right. Brad asked a very great question. What do you think about the generational differences that you see among queer culture? So, like people of different age groups and how they interact with each other, and the kinds of norms of queer culture among different generations. And I thought that was a fascinating thing, and I kind of wanted to look at it in the context of our connection to history and queer culture. So I think that the thing that kind of, to me, I always find fascinating is what do we see as those cultural touchstones for gay culture and what gay culture is supposed to mean. So when I was first coming out, and the older men that I was hanging out with, we had conversations about things like Torch Song Trilogy or Erasure or like club music, Sylvester, things about the late 70s and disco and queer culture in the 70s, 80s, even though this was like the early 90s. And then, things like that kind of just keep trickling down. So one of the things that I find fascinating is just to kind of trace like the degrees of separation between something like the kind of dialogue and the slang that's used in RuPaul's Drag Race that people are picking up about shade and realness and all of this stuff, and going back to that black queer culture from things like Paris is Burning, and then taking it even a step beyond that, going back to like queer culture in like the 60s and 50s, where there was a whole other slang dialect, Polari. So this is very common in Britain. Kind of some of it crossed over to the pond. That's where we get the word drag from. Is from Polari. And so there's like this like evolutionary chain, where you see things kind of floating out from like this queer little dialogue slang from London that kind of carries over into scenes like New York, and this gets picked up by all of these queens living in New York who are part of this drag ball community, and now this has become like this mainstream popular television show, and all of this language just is like this through line through it. So that to me is fascinating to kind of see like the way that queer culture and queer history just kind of continues this little thread, even though there are these radical differences in the way that we interact with it. So I hope that answers your question, Brad. Tom Goss asked about the NBA playoffs, and I have no idea who the hell is in the NBA playoffs. I do know that that's basketball. I do not follow sports in any particular way, but have fun with that, I guess. I know that March Madness was like a month ago, but that's college basketball, I believe. So anyways, whatever. Sean asked me about self-care post-illness. So like I've been sick this whole week and it's been awful. And Sean asked about like con crud, like, going to bear runs and coming back and you've got like, kennel cough and that kind of thing. And what do you do? Um, the kind of things that you would normally do to try to take care of any kind of cough, cold situation: hydration, rest, making sure that you're eating things that are nutritionally sound, that don't irritate your throat. Soup, stuff like that is always fine. Making sure that you take your vitamins to stay up on stuff like that. But for me, I also try to attempt to live a sense of normalcy. So kind of like, I'm one of those people that pushes through an illness. And so like, I'll get up, I'll like do chores, I'll take care of the housework. And, if I have the time, I'll cook a meal, so for me, I try to make sure that I'm keeping myself active and resting when I need to. So for me, that's kind of my regimen. I don't tend to get terribly sick all the time. I used to, but not so much anymore. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. And lastly, I know this has gone on a bit longer than normal, but Lionel and Doc asked me about Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest stuff, and what do I think about it, and what are my kind of highlights from what I've seen so far. So I've got just a couple of things to say about that. Um, First of all, I think that the thing that came out recently about degrees of success and failure, I think is a lot of fun. I think that there will be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth of critical failures now, because right now when you roll a 1, it is not a big deal. Sometimes it is just a generic failure. Sometimes there are consequences if you fail a skill check by more than 5. It can be extra problematic, but that's usually only if it's written in that way. But this is going to make it like far more complex in the way that GMs have to deal with resolving combat, social interactions, skill checks. There's going to be degrees of success and failure on all of that, and I think that's pretty cool. Um, I think that it's fine that they've decided to go with the word feats for all of the stuff that's class special. So every class, clerics and fighters and wizards and this and that have their own special doodads that they can do that are inherently a part of what they learn as a class, right? And those have been called by a number of different things like improvisations or arcane exploits and things like that. But now they're just all going to be called feats, and so they'll all be written into the class as a class feat, which is no big deal. I think that this is just a semantic difference for some stuff that's already happening. I think a lot of people have made a lot of mess about that, but I think that it's probably fine. I'm not quite sure what's going on with this whole thing about magical resonance. I think this has to do with concepts like attunement, but about everyone having some kind of magical resonance that you need to pour into things like potions. I don't even know. It sounds like complicated, and maybe it's not complicated, but like it sounds like a hassle when I would rather just like chug a potion and not have to like energize my potions before I am able to use them, or to energize my magical boots or amulets or this and that, whatever. That just seems like kind of a waste of time. And then lastly, I really don't know what's going on with this concept of proficiency scores. Um, Proficiency scores in D&D is something that I absolutely hate, because one of the things that I really love about Pathfinder is that you can really play and fiddle with a character's skills. I really love the concept of skill checks and the way that skills function. And if that goes the way of D&D 5th Ed, I really will be sad, because one of the things that I absolutely hate about playing in D&D 5th edition is that my skills are just kind of set. And that's just no fun. I want to be able to craft something new and exciting with my linguistics score. Like, sure, I want to be able to speak like 27 languages and like get special feats because I've poured time and energy into linguistics, and not just have it be like a +1 or a +2, being proficient in some kind of thing or another. So I remain skeptical about the proficiency system and how that may function, because I am, like I said, I'm not a fan of how it functions in 5th ed, but we'll see how Paizo does it up. Well, this video has gone on entirely too long, but I did get to answer every single one of the questions that I was asked, except for Ken, who was slamming on our good friend JD Holmquist here on the channel. Ken, shame on you. Shame on you. But thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram, and I'll see you all next Friday. Cheers!